Good afternoon, everybody. You're going to have to remind me, how does this session go? I can't remember. What do we do? It involves meditation in some way. Is that right? Okay, excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I can still see one or two people coming. Yeah, you'll have to pardon my voice this afternoon. I've been losing my voice the last couple of days, so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so for this afternoon's meditation class, I thought I might just share a few tricks and tweaks for your meditation. And this is just, I'm not going to try and give an overall teaching on meditation too much, but mostly just talk about a few different ways that we can approach dealing with various kinds of issues. The first kind of issue which comes up in meditation that people always ask about is, how do I deal with distracting thoughts? So the answer to that is, well, that's very simple. That's what the meditation is. Meditation is how you deal with distracting thoughts. There's no one particular trick or whatever that will solve that. But there's a deeper way of looking at it, which is that distracting thoughts are not something that you should be seeing as a problem or something that you should be overcoming. Rather than trying to push your way or try to make the thoughts go away, it's often much more effective and much more useful to reflect on them and to use some wisdom. You think of the the thoughts as being, they're part of who you are. And when part of your mind is speaking, then you think of it like a little child. It's trying to say something, and you might not want to hear what that little child has to say, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is that the child wants to be heard. And the things that the child says are not necessarily sensible. They're not necessarily, wise or even really worth listening to. But that's not the point. The point is that there's some reason why the child wants to say those things. There's some reason why the child wants to be heard. And it's the same thing with your mind. There's a reason why part of your mind wants to be heard. That's why we think. Because there's a part of our mind which we believe to be unacknowledged or unforgiven or not understood or not listened to. And the more that we try to push those thoughts away, the more insistent they become. Like if you try to shut down a child and have them not talk, they just get more and more frustrated. So rather than trying to push this side of yourself away, listen. Oh, okay. And just listen, and then put it down, and then come back to your breath. You don't need to get involved in a long conversation with yourself. You don't need to try to analyze things or work out why you're thinking this or that, whether this is good or wholesome or not. But just some compassion. Just to remember that this is part of who you are. Understand that, bring that inside. Oh, okay. And the more that we're able to own our thoughts, the more integrated our mind is. We don't have all of these competing voices in our head trying to say this and that and the other. So this is a step towards unity, a step towards oneness in the mind. So this is the first suggestion for your meditation. When you have thoughts coming into your mind, rather than trying to reject them, try to listen to them with compassion. Of course, the problem there, the tempting thing, is that instead of just listening to them, we get involved in we start to talk back. We get involved in a conversation, right? So you're sitting there inside your head, having a conversation with yourself, which is a somewhat strange thing to be doing, really. But we do it a lot of the time. And it's even stranger if you're having arguments with yourself. So anyway, there's no need to get into a conversation with the voices in your head. Just listen. Oh, okay. And let it go. Now, when it comes to watching the breath, then there are two extremes that we often tend to fall into. And the Buddha used a very beautiful simile for these, and he's talking about his own meditation. He said that when he was learning to meditate, he said it was like he was holding a little bird. And when he's holding this little bird, sometimes he would hold it too tightly. And then if you hold it too tightly, then you crush it. And sometimes if you hold it too loosely, then it'll fly away. So that simile is a very beautiful one for how we pay attention to the breath. And it's one of those similes which I think if you've ever meditated, you can immediately recognize what that means. And sometimes when we're paying attention to the breath, we hold on to it too tightly. It's like we're strangling the breath. And so you get, it's where you get like a tight throat or constricted belly, or your furrowed brow, even get a headache if it gets very bad. And then the opposite extreme is when you just don't pay attention at all. The mind just goes very woolly and you just end up falling asleep. It's like you let it fly away. So both of these are extremes that we should try to avoid. One of the ways that I find is useful to avoid those extremes, when beginning the meditation is to just make it a practice to not to try to keep your mind with your breath, but to just make it an exercise or a practice to keep on replacing your mind on the breath. Do you understand the difference there? Rather than trying to sort of put the mind with the breath and then just hold it there, because what tends to happen is the mind is still scattered and wants to go somewhere else, and so you sort of tense to hold it there. So rather than doing that, just put the mind on the breath. When you breathe in, and then when you breathe out, then bring the mind again. And when you breathe out, breathe in, put the mind back again. When you breathe out, bring the mind back again. So it's almost like this kind of rhythm that you keep applying the mind again and again and again. If you want to help yourself to do that, then what a lot of meditators do to support that is they use like a meditation word. And sometimes meditators will use like the word Buddho, or there can be many different kinds of words that you can use. It doesn't really matter too much what it is, but it's just the point is to help to hook your mind onto the breath. And a lot of meditators use a counting technique. And the counting technique can be useful, although a counting technique is not useful or is counterindicated if you tend to get too tense in your meditation. Okay, then when you start to count it, you start to get even too tight. But if your problem is the opposite problem, if your problem is that you're drifting away from the meditation and you need to be brought back to the breath, then using a counting technique can be very useful. And one technique that I used a lot was a technique taught originally by Ajahn Lee Dhammadhara, and he suggested counting to 10. So you count on the in-breath 1, on the out-breath 1, in-breath 2, out-breath 2, in-breath 3, out-breath 3, and so on, up to 10. And then back again from 10 to 1. In-breath 10, out-breath 10, in-breath 9, out-breath 9, in-breath 8, out-breath 8, back to 1. And then again 1 to 9, 9 to 1, 1 to 8, 8 to 1, 1 to 7, 7 to 1, 1 to 6, 1 to 6, 6 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 1. And then you do the whole thing again in reverse. 1 to 5, 5 to 1, 1 to 6, 6 to 1, 1 to 7, 7 to 1, 1 to 8, 8 to 1, 1 to 9, 9 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 1. And then you go, yay, congratulations. So if you go that whole kind of round, it usually takes about 20 minutes or so. So as long as you can still remember your place there, then you can keep that sequence. If your mind wanders so far that you forget where you are in that sequence, then you have to start again. But this also is one of the good things about that practice, is that it lets you know when your mind wanders so far. So that can be quite a good way, especially if your problem is that you tend to sort of really lose focus and drift and fall asleep in your meditation. It gives you something, a bit more of a task to do, that you can exercise your mind in that idea of just keeping on replacing your mind with the breath each time. But remember what I said, that don't do that if you find that it makes you become too tight. Another trick that you can use is that the two breaths, the in-breath and the out-breath, each have a slightly different quality. The in-breath is the energy breath and the out-breath is the relaxation breath. So each time you breathe in, you're bringing energy into you. And each time you breathe out, you're relaxing, energizing and relaxing. And that's that kind of rhythm, which is that's part of the reason why the breath is soothing, because that's a very kind of natural rhythm that life has. Daytime is the energy time, nighttime is the relaxing time. Summer's the energy time, winter's the relaxing time. And so we're always used to these kind of rhythms of tension and relaxation. The same thing with all your muscles when you use them, and all the different parts of your body. This is how things work, the tension and relaxation. So the energy and then relaxing. But that can also, you can use that to overcome problems in your breath, in your meditation. If you find that you're falling asleep, then pay attention mainly to the in-breath. Yeah? So you focus on the in-breath, focus on the energy breath. If you find that you're getting too tense, then focus on the relaxing breath. Each time you breathe out, letting go. So that's another way you can use to sort of adjust your energy in the meditation. And there's one, I'll just give one more for now before we begin the meditation, one more trick that you can use. And this is a good one if you find that you're very sleepy and you're trying to meditate and your mind is like really dark and you don't even know if you're awake or asleep or whatever. You can try counting, you can try a very difficult counting technique. And that can actually be very useful to keep your mind awake. So a difficult counting technique, you can use all kind of mathematical permutations if you like, or another one is to count in different languages. Right? So if you know how to count in a few different languages, you can go in one, out nung in Thai, and then in dwe in Pali, and then out sam in Thai again, I guess. Or whatever languages that you know. And so you get like a pattern. And then when you're doing the meditation, of course you're not going to get very peaceful doing that, but that's not the point. The point is that you need to wake up. So by doing that, then it just keeps you engaged enough. It's like a little kind of language game that you're playing with yourself. And because it's just keeping you engaged that little bit to sort of remembering that pattern, then that will kind of bring you through that period when you're very sleepy. Yeah, without kind of forcing yourself, without kind of fighting the sleepiness, but it just sort of keeps the mind engaged a little bit through that period, and then when the mind comes through that period of sleepiness and the mind brightens up, then you're there and you'll still have kept your mindfulness for that time, and then you can just go back to meditating an ordinary way. Okay, so that's enough for now. That's a few tips and tweaks for your meditation. So let's do some breath meditation for the next 45 minutes, and if anyone has any of those problems, you've got some new ways of approaching them. so now we come to the question time. So we have a few questions from overseas and one in the box. So I don't know if anybody here has any questions. Maybe we can hear them afterwards. But anyway, let's start with the ones from OS. First question from Josh from the United States. Hello, Josh. How are you? When I reach a deep state of relaxation during meditation, I suddenly feel a strong rush of anxiety sometimes when my body disappears. How can I overcome this? That's a very good question. Congratulations, Josh. You're doing very well. When we meditate, when we begin to meditate, it's a somewhat trivial exercise. We sit down and we watch our breath go in and out, and sometimes we watch our breath and sometimes we don't, and the mind gets a bit more peaceful and sometimes it doesn't. And that's often the end of the matter. That's all that happens. But the deeper that we go into meditation, the more amazing things start to happen. I remember the first time I meditated, and I was doing a retreat in Thailand, and they told me how to meditate, and I sat down for 20 minutes and did some meditation, and at the end of it I thought, is that all? Is that what's this stuff about anyway? Everyone's getting so excited about meditation and nothing happened. Needless to say, it takes a bit more than that to get anywhere interesting. So as we go on, we gradually start to peel off the layers of the mind. We go deeper and deeper. We step further out of the so-called real world. And we step more into the actual real world, which is the world of the mind. And along that way, we often encounter things which are unusual, fascinating, disturbing, and sometimes just downright freaky. So you've got to be, when you're practicing, you've got to be prepared for all of these things to happen. And you also have to be prepared for all of these things to not happen. Because a lot of the times meditation isn't like that. A lot of the times it's just fairly ordinary and nothing much goes on. And that's fine too. That's not a problem. So we shouldn't be looking for extraordinary things to happen, nor should we be shying away from them. But one of the main tendencies of the human mind is that we tend to be afraid of the unknown. In fact, that's probably the root fear of all. It's interesting to think about, isn't it? I mean, sometimes we think that maybe fear of death is the most fundamental fear that we have. But fear of death is really just fear of the unknown, isn't it? If we knew what was going to happen when we were going to die, we wouldn't be very worried about it, right? So I think it's that fear of the unknown is even more basic. So each time we take that step into the unknown, this can happen at many different levels, even quite simple things. I mean, you probably even felt that, maybe when the first time you came to meditate, you probably felt a bit nervous or a bit, I don't know what's going to happen here, or is this going to go the right way, or am I going to go crazy, or something like that. So you probably have some doubts or a little bit of anxiety or something, even just to the act of sitting meditation for the first time. And then you come and sit and do that once or twice, and then you get used to it. No, it's okay. But that will recur successively as you go deeper and deeper in meditation. And one of the curious things about meditation, the curious paradoxes about it, is that, you would think that, or you might think that, as you go deeper into meditation, that because you're overcoming your fears and anxieties and leaving them behind, that these responses would diminish, would gradually fade away. But that's not necessarily the case at all. Actually, what's happening is that your mind is becoming very, very sensitive. Your mind is becoming very attuned. And so that even little things can cause a very strong reaction. I mean, you probably know that from, meditating, and then, maybe you hear a sound, yeah? And then you jump. If you weren't meditating, you wouldn't have that response to it. But because your mind is much more sensitive and still, then even that little sound can actually have quite a big, kind of startled response. So this isn't a sign that there's anything wrong with your meditation. It's just a sign that it's not completely still and full and balanced and complete yet, that's all. So you just keep on going when those things happen. And one of the most startling of these kinds of responses that you can have is the experience which Josh is talking about. Just to repeat, when I reach a deep state of relaxation during meditation, I suddenly feel a strong rush of anxiety sometimes when my body disappears. How can I overcome this? Right? So you're sitting there very, very peaceful, very relaxed, and so relaxed that sometimes your body feels like it's going to disappear. Is it any wonder that you feel anxiety because your body is disappearing? It's kind of a freaky thing, isn't it, right? Imagine you were just walking down the street and suddenly your body disappears. You'd be like, whoa, what's going on? Right? It's the same thing in meditation. The body is all we've known. Every waking moment. Since we were born, we've been running around in this body. And all of a sudden it's not there? Of course that's going to freak you out. So what you're seeing there is that kind of deep, very subtle and very deep attachment to the body, yeah? Which is grabbing hold of it, doesn't want to let it go. So as far as overcoming it, the first thing to do is to just understand it as I've just explained, and then you realise, it's very natural. Okay, it's not specific to you. It's nothing unusual. It's just a very normal thing that happens. Now, most of the time, all you have to do is just do it a few times, and you gradually get more familiar with the experience. And as you get used to it, it's not unknown anymore. And then it's okay. Okay? But if you're finding that that's not working and that you need to do something to help you to overcome that fear, then you can just try practicing before you come to sit meditation. Okay? So before you come to do your normal samatha meditation, watching the breath or whatever that you're doing, just spend a few minutes each meditation doing some contemplation of impermanence. And so just go through the senses, for example. Yeah, so seeing, and you notice how sometimes you see, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you see this, sometimes you see that, and you just contemplate, reflect for a while that it's impermanent. Reflect on the sound. Your ear is impermanent. Reflect on the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind as impermanent. And so if you do that before you start to sit, then you're pre-programming your mind to accept the idea that all of these things will disappear. And as you're sitting to meditate, gradually these things will disappear. Now, when you're actually meditating, you just focus on the meditation. You don't reflect on impermanence while you're doing that. You just focus on the meditation. But again, afterwards, what you can do when the meditation's finished, you can reflect on impermanence again. Look back over that meditation and look back at what actually happened during that process. Notice that when you first sat down that, there was these tensions in your body and that they disappeared. as your body became more tranquil, and that was very pleasant. You noticed that your mind was thinking about this and that, and then as you became more peaceful, it gradually let go of those thoughts, and that was very pleasant. And so if you, at the end of the meditation, remind yourself and reflect back on the fact that the ending of all of these things is very pleasant. Tesang vupasamo sukho. It's in the last, the verses spoken at the death of the Buddha. Anicca sankhara upadavaya dhammino upajitva niruddhanti tesang vupasamo sukho. Alas, all conditioned things are impermanent. They are subject to rise and fall. Having come into being, they pass away. Their stilling is bliss. So we reflect on that at the end of each of the meditation. It was the ending of those things. That was why that meditation was very pleasant. When I started out, I was worrying about that. And then I let go of that worry. It ceased. And it felt so good. And so when you reflect like that, if you do that, just reflect like that for a few minutes at the end of each meditation, and then again you're helping to program your mind to understand that the impermanence of things is pleasant. So anyway, good luck with that, Josh. Next question, Tan from Singapore. How do you gauge insight during meditation? Do you contemplate, e.g., impermanence, or does insight come naturally? Bit of both, really. Ask yourself, how does wisdom and how does insight arise in your life? Now, if we look at that, then I think what we find is that there's usually a twofold process, which is actually a threefold process. The twofold process is, if you want to understand something, or there's a process of inquiry and finding it out, learning stuff, thinking about it, reflecting, asking, questioning. Right? So there's that kind of active stage of doing things. But then there's the stage of actual insight and understanding things. And that insight and understanding of things happens all by itself. It just comes. And these are two quite different things. But one is dependent on the other, right? If we don't do the inquiry and the investigation and the learning, then the insight, that moment of clarity, won't arise. So these are the two things, but why are the two things really three things? Because in between those, there's something else. In between the investigation and the inquiry and the insight, the moment of clarity, there's stillness. So if the deeper the stillness is, then the deeper the insight will become. This is a very, very mysterious part of how the mind works. You know, we think we know how the mind works, but it is so mysterious. Let me ask you, and it's not just complicated things, it's simple things as well. Let me ask you just a simple question. What's 7 plus 4? Right? Now you all know the answer to that. And let me ask you a question, where did that answer come from? And when I ask this to people, I've asked this many times, people usually say, it came from memory. Right? But no, that's not what I want to know. That's just using a word to try to pretend that we know how this is happening. What actually happened in your experience? First I said something, and then a number, 11, came into your mind. First it wasn't there, and then it was. It's not like we go to a place in our mind called memory and then pull out this number and then say, here it is. It's just not there, and there it is. That's how insight happens. The understanding isn't there in your mind, and then it is. And we can't force that. And there are many, many descriptions of this in the Buddhist scriptures when it's talking about, especially if you look at the Theragatha and Therigatha, where it gives the accounts of how the monks and nuns in the past became enlightened. And they're constantly saying things like that. One nun was saying, like, I washed my feet, and as I washed my feet and I saw the water disappearing, suddenly my mind was freed. Another one saying, I went back to my hut in the evening and I turned out the lamp, and as the lamp went out, just then my mind was released. So that moment of clarity, it just happens. We can't force it, we can't make it happen. Okay? But what we can do is to cultivate the conditions that will conduce to and will help the arising of those moments of insight. So, and one of the ways we do that is through doing what we call vipassana meditation. And there are many different ways that we can do vipassana meditation. You can go on different retreats and so on. People will teach them. You can use Dhamma teachings. And there's many suttas where the Buddha teaches like this. You use the different frameworks of the Dhamma as a guideline for you to structure your meditation and your reflection. So one of the easiest ones to do is the six senses. So when the Buddha analysed the six senses, as he did many times, he said you have the eye, the sights, the things you see, and the eye consciousness, and the coming together of the three is contact. And so this is a framework that you can use for your meditation. You meditate firstly on your eye, just on the inward physical base of your sight. Yeah? What is it like? What does it feel like? You can imagine it, what your eyes look like, what they feel like. You can actually feel the touch of them sitting there in your eye socket. And you get a clear impression in your mind of what your eye is like. When you have a clear impression of that, then you get a clear impression of what is sight's like. And then you just, even if you're meditating, you can open your eyes a little bit and just not look at things, but just look at what that quality of sight and seeing is like. And just focus on that seeing for a while until you get a clear idea of that. Yeah. And then the consciousness, the awareness of that sight. And so you notice what that is like. Okay, so have these three things, and then you can do that for each one of the senses, and then you can play around with that in various ways. You can contemplate it as impermanent. You can look at you can compare the different senses. For example, you get a very clear idea of what seeing is, and then you compare that with hearing. And when you do that, it's actually quite startling, because seeing is such a completely different kind of thing than hearing is. And yet normally when we create our world, we see a person and they speak to us, and we put those two things together and it's a person talking, right? And in fact, there's two completely different things happening which we've joined together in our mind. So you contemplate these things in themselves, and then you contemplate how they're connected with each other. And so then you begin to understand the conditionality and so on. So that's like a meditation exercise that you can use to get you started for doing vipassana. And many different ways that you can do that. And these kinds of practices, you can do that as a complement to your stilling the mind practice through doing breath meditation and so on. And that will help you to lead to those moments of insight and clarity arising. Okay, question of Na in Adelaide. Good afternoon, Na. How's Adelaide doing today? It's very warm today in Perth. Okay, I always wake up around 1:30 a.m. in the morning. That's ridiculous. Every day, with a feeling of peacefulness and stillness inside. Okay, no one's allowed to be jealous here. Okay, the jealousy is an unwholesome emotion. Should I take advantage of this and do meditation at this time? Absolutely. Yes. It's very interesting, isn't it? We have different body clocks and different people have different, metabolisms and so on. Apparently there was some research done on sleep patterns that came out a couple of years ago that showed that actually traditionally people used to have a sleep pattern which was much more like that. They used to sort of go to bed and sleep for a few hours and then wake up and do stuff, and then in the middle of the night, and then go to sleep again until dawn. And apparently that was quite common. So this idea that if you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel like meditating, then great, go for it. I had one meditation student when I was staying in Malaysia. They came to me one time and said, "Oh, Ajahn, I have a problem in meditation." I said, "What's your problem?" And she said, "Well, when I go to bed at night, I lie down and I watch my breath coming in and out." I said, "Oh, that's good." And she said, "Yeah, and I feel very, very peaceful. And I just lie there and my mind feels very, very peaceful, and my mind gets brighter and brighter and brighter until my mind is just filled with light. And that light just stays with me all night. And I just lie there full of light the whole night, and I don't sleep at all." And I said, "Well, how do you feel the next day?" She said, "Oh, I feel fine." I said, "I don't think that's a problem." Okay. Okay. So this little message here says, "Thanking you, Ajahn Brahm." Ajahn Brahm's not here. Anyway, I'm the substitute Ajahn Brahm for today. This person's asking about going into an unknown future, an entirely new life situation. How can you stop the panicky feelings and enjoy, very good question, to enjoy going to the future with joy and a new vision and accept what may come without fear? So this is also a very good question, and somehow relates to that first question about meditation, about your body disappearing when you're going into meditation, and that fear of the unknown. You know, if you think about it, that we are always kind of afraid of the unknown, and that fear comes up very quickly. But also it's from the unknown that we learn, isn't it? If we always stick to what we know, we never learn anything. You know, we get very complacent and narrow-minded very quickly. That's one of the things I've been very conscious of since I've been a monk. I don't like to just always keep on doing the same thing, because you end up getting very complacent very easily. So I always like to challenge myself, do something different, get into a new situation. So if you're finding that your life is changing, then that's good. Just go forward. You feel afraid? That's all right. Fear is just a feeling. Anxiety is just a feeling. Don't worry about them too much. They'll come and they'll go. But you look to what are those things that you can learn. And one of the things that I've noticed in life is that if you have people who are always scared of new things, always kind of focusing on what are the drawbacks of doing new things, and they never actually accomplish anything that's really, really positive. So always have to bring this kind of attitude of saying, yeah, okay, the future can be scary, change can be scary, but that's okay. We've got this far, so let's just give it a go. So don't run away from the panicky or anxious feelings. Just accept them. That's just feelings. It's natural. But do what you know is going to be the right thing to do. Okay, so that should be enough for those questions. So we're nearly at the end of this afternoon. Any questions from the floor before we finish? No. Any questions from the people on the floor? No? Okay, very good. Just before we go, I'll just give a bit of a plug for the early Buddhism course, which I'm starting up here at the end of next month. So it'll be starting. It'll be the fourth Sunday of each month. You'll find some course descriptions on the desk in the registration desk or the entry desk. And the course, basically the idea is that we're looking at this in trying to understand or study Buddhism. Of course, what we encounter very often is different schools of Buddhism. We encounter Theravada Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism and so on and so forth. But of course, these are not things that the Buddha himself taught. He never, if you said to the Buddha, what do you think is right, Theravada or Mahayana, he'd say, I'm sorry, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. He'd never heard of these words, right? So what he taught was the Dhamma. And one of the things which has been very inspiring and very interesting for me was to try to investigate and inquire as to, well, what is that Dhamma? What is it that the Buddha himself actually taught? And as soon as we ask that question, we're led into a field of historical inquiry, looking at the ancient texts, at the social conditions, the context. We start to ask questions like, how is it that we know what the Buddha taught and what he didn't teach, right? Somebody once said to me, they'd heard a saying, the Buddha said, the saying of the Buddha, never use a cannon to shoot a fly. Never use a cannon to shoot a fly. The Buddha never said that because there weren't any cannons in the time of the Buddha apart from anything else, right? So if you know something about the social context, you know that the Buddha didn't say that. So, but there are many other things where it's not so obvious what did the Buddha say and what didn't he say and how do we know this. So what this course on early Buddhism is designed to do is to introduce you to a method and an approach where you can look historically at what actually happened, what are our sources, how do we put those sources together, how do we interpret them, and what was the content of the Buddha's teachings, and so on. And so it should be a very interesting course. I'm really looking forward to it. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I've designed the course together with Ajahn Brahmali, and I'll be presenting it here and also in Sydney. So it'll be on the week before in Sydney. And we do require that you register for the course, okay? The reason for this is because when you register, there will be a box that you tick that says, I understand that I have to complete the reading before the classes. Okay, so there will be reading before the classes, and that will be assumed. Yeah? So I've tried to set it so there's about an hour or two of reading per week. And that's mostly the early discourses with some secondary literature. But all the reading is available online, and the course description and so on is available. So the idea is that on the day we spend a whole day in discussion, some teachings, some meditations, and that's helping us to reflect on and to digest and to understand the reading material. And so there's 6 one-day workshops, okay, once a month. So one day, once a month for 6 months, starting at the end of February. As I said, the course descriptions are over there on the desk, and the registration will be coming online on the BSWA website very shortly. So we're just working on implementing that at the moment, and that should be up very soon. So do check that out. I'm sure it'll be very interesting. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Excuse me, Bhante, thank you for that. Is there a sutta class tomorrow, please?
There is a sutta class tomorrow, yes.
Do you have any idea what it is?
I do have an idea, yes.
Can you let us know, or to prepare or not? Or does it
yeah, I'm just trying to think. I think the number of the sutta is Samyutta Nikaya 1.13. But I'll have to double check that. I think it's 1.13. Okay? But it's only 8 lines long. so I'm not sure how much study you need to do beforehand. Anyway, I think it's 1.13. I'll just have to double check that after this. I'll go over to the library and double check that afterwards if anybody wants to know what's happening for the sutta class tomorrow. Yeah. Okay, and just to let you know that when we're doing the early Buddhism class, and I will discuss this more with the sutta class tomorrow afternoon, but the early Buddhism class will be replacing the sutta class on those days that they clash. Okay, so whenever they occur on the same Sunday, right? But anyway, we need to discuss this with the people at the Sutta class. So if you're a regular at the Sutta class, then we'll talk about this tomorrow. Okay.